Hey everyone, welcome again to our last weekend's session on YouTube. I'm here with Premier Donut Inspector Sam. You guys saw us yesterday, I'm guessing. So we can still go ahead and introduce ourselves just in case there are new people joining in. I'm Shovik. I'm a new alumnus at the Michigan Ross School of Business. I graduated last month, more like 2 weeks back. And Sam's my classmate, but Sam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris. Oh, no, I'm just giving that guy a hard time from yesterday. Just graduated from Ross MBA. Go Blue. I'm headed to Microsoft in the summer, but if not, I'll be at Dunkin' Donuts.
Good. I think Dunkin'. Does Dunkin' Donut match 401k or?
They do, but in crullers. So
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about something that keeps coming up in our sessions, and I've been blamed in the past about why I keep talking about the top schools and not the more achievable schools. And I have some thoughts about that, but at the same time, I think it's a valid concern. I think lots of people apply to schools that we don't talk about. So I wanted to do at least one video to talk about what I think of them, what Sam you think of them, and also what our experiences have been being around people who go to these schools, both in like networking events, but also in actual jobs. So we're going to jump into that. I think a lot of people are tuning in right now, so good for that. We're going to jump into the top 30 schools, but before we do that, I wanted to define what top 30 schools mean. Some of these schools are ranked by US News to be under top 30, but also it would generally mean between like the top 15 to top 30 schools. So anything sort of below Anderson. So I sort of compiled a quick list on some of the schools, so we can go through that. But also at the same time, it becomes a question of how do you really define top 30 or top 40 schools? You'll see that some of these schools are top 30 today based on the 2020 rankings. But, like rankings come and go. They keep fluctuating. So today is top 30. Tomorrow it might be 25 or top 35. But the essence of these schools will sort of remain the same. We are not looking at specifically the top 10, top 15 schools. So I sort of stopped at Johnson and Anderson, but that's an arbitrary stop, right? Because this year, that was sort of their positioning, but next year it might be different. So, Sam, how do you want to do this? So I thought that we could do this by career interest, right? So if you are looking at like tech or consulting or finance or general management, which of these schools makes sense? And I have some opinions. What do you think when somebody applies to like a slightly broader range of schools? What are the things they should be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, go for it because there's a lot of good schools on this list. Second of all, I think when you're talking about from like the 15 to 30, you start getting where these schools are stronger in certain industry concentrations, stronger in geographic regions. It's not that you can't go anywhere from these schools because I think you can. It's just that the recruiting is just a little bit less across the board in terms of industry, companies, and also geography. These kind of schools. But each one of them has really strong suits, whether it be technology or consulting. So yeah, definitely should get into that because that would be good for people.
Yeah, so I felt that's sort of a good pathway because I think one of the ways that I felt top schools, not on this list, like the top 10, the top 12 schools, are different from these schools is that top 10 schools sort of give you like a high-end buffet, if you will. Like you can pretty much, like regardless of whether you go to Ross or Kellogg or Stern, you pretty much have a shot at whatever career you want. I mean, sure, Stern will have some advantages in like banking because of location. Ross may have some advantages in tech or operations. but those are relatively minor. If you want to get into something, you can get there. I would say, though, that may not be true for these schools because I felt that these schools have very specific strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that kind of cross the board ability is lesser at these schools, but some of these are really strong in certain areas and regions, especially if that's a region that you want to be in.
Right.
So these schools, shouldn't be overlooked. And I think that, throughout our feeds together and streams, we've been bringing up a lot of these names, or at least I have, for people to look at.
Awesome. So let's start with tech first, because that's sort of what both of us recruited in heavily.
Yeah.
As most of you should know by now, most of tech, at least big tech in the US, is sort of edged towards the West Coast. Most of the headquarters continue to be in either Seattle or the San Francisco Bay Area. So those schools automatically get an advantage. Do you think that's a acceptable way to hypothesize? If you want to go to tech, you should go to West Coast or Pacific Northwest schools?
I think it's a start because MBA is still very regional, even at the top schools as well. Like there's a lot of regional pulls. And so if you're in the West Coast as a school, you're right in the backyard of big tech, which is right, and small tech, which is all right there. So I think that's a fair statement.
Right. So let's say you want to get into tech and maybe you have a lower GMAT, or maybe you're an Indian male engineer, whatever. You don't think you have a shot, or maybe you got rejected by the top schools. What schools in this list would you look at? Sam, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, so I was asking you, like, if you were looking at West Coast schools to get into tech, which schools in this list are you going to look at?
I mean, I think geographically, Marshall from USC and Foster just jump out.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I think Tepper and McCombs jump out as well. Those four schools jump out from this list if you want to do tech, and they each have their strengths.
Also, like Tepper, the logo is just so cool. I mean, I want to go there just because of the logo. Yeah, I agree. I think some of these schools, especially Tepper and McCombs, they will often ride the wave that's created by their engineering school. Both Carnegie Mellon and UTexas have incredible engineering programs where, software engineers, hardware engineers would go to like all tech companies, right? And I would go on to say like Carnegie Mellon is probably better than, like some schools in the top 5 in terms of engineering. So I felt that Apple, when I was in my summer internship, there were people from McCombs and Tepper, right? And fewer, but there were people. And from my network within these schools, not only they are pretty good in tech recruiting with all the big names coming to campus, but also like when you have a pretty strong alumni working in big tech companies, you can totally leverage. I think for Foster, it's a more locational advantage, right? I think it's just Amazon and Microsoft scooping up Foster grads. But having said that, Foster sort of sends almost like a third of its class to Amazon and Microsoft. It's a small class size, but that's some really impressive numbers.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to do tech from this list, Tepper and Foster would be that top level. And then Texas and McCombs and Marshall would be the two that I would go right below that. But I think Tepper and Foster are great, especially if you love Seattle. And that's a great market to be in. Foster's a great choice. And Tepper just has just a great prestige. I'm actually surprised the MBA school's not higher because of how strong their recruiting is in tech and tech consulting.
Right. I also want to take in another school into consideration, which is the Scheller College of Business. That's from Georgia Tech. And again, Georgia Tech is also one of the most premium engineering schools in the country. So I have seen Georgia Tech graduates at Apple, MBA graduates. I have seen Georgia Tech graduates at Microsoft. So they actually do a pretty good job, but I'm not so sure whether it's the career services in the school or whether there are students networking on their own. So I'm not really sure how robust the placement and the recruiting process is, but it's very clear that those students definitely get work in big tech.
Yeah, and I think at a school like Georgia Tech, if you can leverage your admission into the MBA side to maybe do a dual degree and one more year, and if they have nice scholarship options for that, you really come out with a robust resume and education to get into any really tech.
Yeah. The other thing that I would consider for both for Boston, which is the Questrom School of Business, and for Emory. So these are not traditionally very tech-heavy schools, right? But I was surprised to see that they actually place really well in tech too. You could argue that like tech sort of hires everyone, but one thing that I'm looking at, and I think Wall Street Journal featured this article on Amazon, on how Amazon is sort of expanding its MBA recruiting beyond the top 10, beyond the top 15 schools, which is definitely good news for these schools. And Sam, when you and I went to Seattle and visited Microsoft for the business case competition, I remember having this conversation with one of the lead HR, where they sort of echoed the same sentiment that I think tech companies are sort of coming out of this top school bubble, and they're sort of giving a fair shot to people from any school as long as they have the resume and as long as they have the skills. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you want to use this as all like a piques your interest thing, and then you investigate more with their career services and say, okay, which tech companies do you have a stronger pipeline with? But yeah, I think Emory is on that list too. I mean, I think I would put Emory a touch lower than Tepper and Foster for tech because of geographic and because they're kind of just coming to the party, so to speak, with it. But Emory is a really strong choice for a lot of reasons.
Right.
In this range of schools.
Awesome. So let's jump into consulting, right?
Yeah.
And consulting is sort of one of the next big career interests that most people get into business schools for, right? So if you had to pick a couple schools from here for success in consulting, which schools would you go with?
I think UNC jumps out. Emory would jump out to me. I think Tepper especially for tech consulting.
Yeah.
And I think Georgetown, especially for East Coast and DC stuff. But all the other ones on the list too, I think have a decent consulting recruiting as well. But those kind of jump out initially.
Yeah, so for me, consulting, I've seen this over and over again, that big consulting firms, they have target schools, right? And by target schools, what they mean is they'll actually go to these campuses, they'll send their campus reps, they'll send consultants, recruiters, and all of that stuff. And they will actively try to hire people from those schools, right? And there will be alumni from these schools who will sort of, try to get more people from their own school, right? And some schools are just fortunately or unfortunately targets of big consulting companies. I would say, though, that within this list, both Texas and Tepper are target schools for most consulting companies. And I would say the same thing for UNC as well. So Tepper, Texas, and UNC, they are sort of top 20, top 18-ish. And they seem to be targets for big consulting firms. And I think MBB would go there, Deloitte would go there, EY would go there, Accenture would go there. I think it sort of wanes out as you go below the top 20. Like, for example, I don't think Foster is a target school for MBB, which just plain means that MBB won't go to that school. But does that mean you can't get a job in MBB? No, you can totally get a job in MBB. In fact, I had a friend for back in India who is just finishing his second year at Foster right now. And he interviewed for McKinsey. He went to the final round. Well, he didn't get the job, but that didn't have anything to do with the fact that he went to Foster. So I would say, though, like, if you really want MBB and if you really want the best shot possible to consulting recruiting, I would say Texas, Tepper, UNC are probably your best shot, but I wouldn't really scoff on Kelly. I think Deloitte is a big target for Kelly, but they had to take a lot of Deloitte Tech, Georgetown, and Emory. I think they're all fair game.
Yeah, I think you want to, with consulting, when you get to the 15 to 30, you want to think, is the school near a big consulting office in a big city? So the Southeast, you have Atlanta. In the Southwest, you have Houston and Dallas.
Right.
So that's why Tech and a ton of people go there. Even from Michigan, people would go to both Atlanta and Texas.
Yeah.
For the offers. So that's why those schools have a nice pipeline with those firms.
Right. So also, like, the other thing is, I think you touched on this, and I want to just get there, is that consulting recruiting can also be super original.
Yeah.
Consulting recruiting is often office specific. So if you want to work in the South, or if you want to work in the Southwest, I think, schools like Texas, schools like Emory probably have a better chance in getting you there than most other schools in the East Coast or in the Northwest. So keep that in mind. I think geography is a big thing for domestic students. International students, maybe not so much, but it might be helpful to consider some of that. Also, there are some rumors on how East Coast and West Coast consulting is like more competitive than South. I don't think that's true, to be honest, but you can definitely play the game. A lot of people do play the office game and try to get into less competitive offices. Awesome. So let's talk about finance recruiting, right? And that sort of trips me up a little bit because I think it gets very hard beyond the top 20 to break into investment banking or private equity and all of that stuff. But I'd love to know what you think first.
Yeah, I think with investment banking and private equity, I think it's hard to begin with, but you probably want to shoot towards the top 12, 15 schools and ones more located towards the Northeast.
Yeah.
But if finance, you're considering corporate finance, I think UNC and Emory are great choices because they're sitting right next to Atlanta and Charlotte, which are huge finance hubs in the South.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's important, and also I think it's the same thing with consulting. Like, most shops would have target schools, and if you are from a target school, good for you. You have more opportunities. But if you are from a non-target school, it doesn't mean you can't get in. You just have to put in a lot more legwork, and that's pretty much the case. I would say it's going to be very challenging to get into an investment banking job, both for the summer and for full time. If you're from a school like Foster, it's just going to be really tough because A, it is so far away, and B, it's just not the network of investment bankers. But if you're in Emory or if you're in even UNC, yeah, you can totally get there.
Yeah, I think if you finance from this list, Emory, UNC, and maybe Georgetown, not sure. But though Emory and UNC jump out from a finance section, you've got chances to go to Northeast, and you've got some nice fallbacks in the strong finance sector in the Southeast.
Awesome. So I just wanted to quickly, these three are the main career tracks, right? But there are other careers that MBAs graduate and go to, things like general management, things like strategy, corporate strategy, and stuff like that. Marketing comes to mind. I would say the most general thing about this is they're still industry specific. So, for example, if you want to do marketing, if you want to do tech marketing, Foster is still, just because of the location, Foster, Marshall, Texas, they are really good schools for those things. However, if you want to do traditional CPG marketing that are more located either in the West Coast or Chicago, you will still have to look at alumni. You'll still have to look at where people went there. And in that case, I would be more comfortable with a school like maybe Tepper, maybe Texas, maybe Emory.
I think Kelly could probably be, I'm not sure totally, but they may be strong in CPG marketing and stuff in the Midwest.
Yeah, like Indiana is a big hub, and it's again very close to everything else in Chicago too. So that always helps. And Chicago has like the biggest CPG companies all lined up, so that might be super useful.
And you also have Texas with airlines, which is a airline used to be. Hopefully, they still stay. Used to be a big.
Yeah, I have stocks in airlines. Okay, like Warren Buffett has got nothing on me. No, I agree. And by the way, airlines, I don't know what will happen this year, but airlines also are a big recruiter for MBAs.
Yeah.
They have like commercial strategy and like corporate strategy and all of that stuff. So they tend to be a pretty strong recruiting pool. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. So I guess my bottom line is that don't scoff on these schools, okay? These schools will start looking a lot more attractive when you get your rejections from your top schools. And just so that you know, I applied to McCombs, I applied to Foster. These are the two schools that I applied from this list. And I was talking to Sam right before the video, and he mentioned that he was ready to go if he didn't get in at round one. He was ready to go to Foster and Emory in round two.
Yeah, Foster, Emory, Tepper, and Texas, I believe, were the four that I was ready to go. And you just don't know. That's the thing. It's very competitive.
Yeah.
You're going to find the same thing with company recruiting. Just don't know. So you got what you want and your dream.
Yeah.
But these schools are, and I hate to say fallbacks because they're not. They're very good schools, and you can do exactly what you want from them there. You just got to be a touch more strategic. But you have to be more strategic in life anyway than the next person. So
yeah, it's also like, one of the things that I see, and I was talking to you, Sam, about this yesterday, that I have classmates who sort of came to Ross, and it felt like, and like when I came to Ross was number 7. Like right now it's number 7 or something. But Ross suddenly jumped in rankings. And I had classmates who like, oh, I'm in the top 10 business schools. Yeah, like my life is just golden. I won't have to work. I mean, jobs will just come to me. That's not true. I mean, you still have to work very hard. And I had extremely challenging moments during recruiting. And I got lucky, but a lot of people did not. So
no, the grind, the networking never ends until you get that job you want. And even if you're at Harvard, you still got to do it because networking and connections is a big thing especially in the United States hiring landscape. And then even when you get the job, the networking doesn't end because you want to get your next job and you want to keep moving up and get on the team that you like. So it just never ends. It's a really good practice to kind of start that mechanism now and not really stop it for probably the first 5-6 years of your career.
Awesome. All right. So with that said, we're almost coming to the end of the video. So I just want to do quick housekeeping. If you want us to talk about a specific topic, the best way to do that is to put in comments. So BB from GMAT Club checks the comments, and then he sort of pushes me to do specific videos, which I don't say no to. So do that. That's generally useful. The other thing is I'm pretty tired today, if you can't tell. That's because I took the GRE last night, right? And it was fun. I spent about like 4 hours taking the test. It was a lot of fun. It was very late last. I think I got done at like 2. I'm doing a video tomorrow about the GRE. So I took the GMAT online 2 weeks back. Took the GRE yesterday online from home. So I'm going to sort of compare the two tests tomorrow. So tomorrow it's at 7 a.m. Pacific. So it's like a little bit unusual time for us. So it's 2 hours before we started, right? So join us tomorrow for that. And yeah, so we have a few more minutes. So with that, I'm going to go to questions. Let's see. Does any school jump out in the energy clean tech space? With your name, I think you're Indian or from India. So by the way, for energy, I think any school in the South or the Midwest should be good. But at the same time, what jobs are you going to look at? It's going to be hard to get into energy. It's going to be hard to get into clean tech. They don't often sponsor. So the better route, in my opinion, would be go through something like consulting, like tech, like finance, which are more accessible to international students, and then make the switch. What do you think?
Yeah, I think make the switch to a more specified consultant in energy and then jump into. But I guess schools in Texas jump out for if you want to get right there right away.
Yeah. Considering the insanely high cost of an MBA, can you discuss about cost to career path? We did a video on how much does the MBA cost. We are also planning to do a video of how much people make out of business school. We did a video on this already, but I felt like we could do better. So we might just do a video on the ROI, but the short answer to that is it's totally worth it. Okay, so considering that you're getting paid like 150 grand ish a year after your MBA, I think it's pretty worth it. Can you share examples of applicable schools for people with sales background? We can get into consulting. It depends. Your school choices don't change based on your background. Sam, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and especially consulting, that's more of like a broad swath. You know, when you start to get to management, same kind of deal. Right. Marketing, a little bit more specified. It also depends. Those are every type of company. Tech, cookie companies have all three of these. So it also depends on what industry you want to be in as well.
Yeah. Sorry, just joined. What's the list on the screen right now? Right now, the list on the screen are two people who just graduated from Ross, but there used to be a list of like the top 30, like between 20 to 30 schools. So that's the video topic for today. Seems to be the latter half of top 30. You're absolutely correct. Thoughts on the SMU Cox School of Business? To be really honest, it's tricky. I've heard both good and bad things. Your best bet is to talk to people who went to the school. But I would prefer to go to the school that I mentioned before, like a Kelly or an Emory over Cox. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it all depends. But if you're looking for Texas and you haven't decided on SMU yet, I think Texas is much better. Rice is better. And if you're looking across the country, I think there's other options. If this is the school you've gotten into, like, you still can make it work. You just gotta be very strategic and very pinpoint and a hustler and talk to people at that school that had success and start networking.
Awesome. Okay, is this discussion only about schools in the US? So far, yes. But if you want to talk about international schools, yeah, let us know in the comments and we will try to get there. Looking for top schools for bulge bracket investment banking recruiting, can you give some insight on them? So we did not recruit for investment banking, but I've been around GMAT Club and we have enough friends to know that the best schools for those things are schools in New York City. So you want to look at Stern, Columbia, maybe Johnson. Those are always good schools. That doesn't mean you can't hack into BBIB from like other schools within the area. Like, of course, Kellogg would get you there. Of course, Booth would get you there. It's just that you have to constantly travel. I think of schools in the top 10, I think Stern does the best job. But at the same time, I think you can get into decent investment banking firms from Ross, from Kellogg, from these schools as well. I think my hopes sort of wane the more I go down from that list. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ever want to have a really good shot, I think Ross, Duke, that's kind of and Cornell, like that's kind of the end of the line in terms of number ranking wise.
Yeah.
Because Ross is a fairly strong thing. It's not as sizable as Stern, but it's fairly strong in that group, that cohort that tries to go for investment banking. So, Cornell would probably be kind of the end of the line for me to feel comfortable.
Awesome. Does Questrom, that's Boston University, help in that case because of Boston and proximity to Bain and BCG? So you might think so, but not really. Just because BCG has the word Boston in its name doesn't necessarily mean they hire all people in Boston. So it's just one of their offices in Boston, and that happens to be the HQ. Same for Bain. Bain has a really big office in Chicago, in the West Coast. Actually, like Bain has this really beautiful office in San Francisco, right in the Salesforce Tower, which I think is the best Bain office ever. No, I think the Questrom may have something to do with recruiting in the Boston office. But I think if you are in Chicago, in New York City, you probably have a much better shot at getting into Bain and BCG in their Boston office than if you go to Questrom. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree kind of across the board.
Awesome.
Nothing much more to add there.
How important is the school location versus the target work geography? Example, if I want to work in India in future, does it make sense to get an MBA from the UK or India? Current location, UK. So, I mean, look, technically, you want to. I'm taking this question because of India. Technically, you want to get in a school in a geography where you want to work. That's generally a good thumb rule. I think India is a slight exception because Indian business schools are really, really hard to get into. So it is just what it is. Having said that, like, I think you're better off applying to ISB than Warwick. Also, I think you should pick Warwick only if you're completely fine with doing that hustle, trying to find a job in the UK. Sometimes people have like a glitter in their eye when they think, oh, you went to the UK. But I think that's going away as we speak, and more people are comfortable with ISB and IIMs. They're really good institutions. So I don't think you'll have a hard time there. All right, sort of nearing the end of stuff. What's your take on IE Spain as a school for international MBA? It's a really good school, but you should put a comment and let us know if you want us to do international schools. By the way, this brings me to a point where I ask you to drop a like on this video. That generally helps us get to more eyeballs, and subscribe to the video because that helps you to know when we are doing a video. Tomorrow, as the video goes out at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, on my experience with the GRE. And then we have another video at the same time at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, about a GMAT topic. Awesome. With that said, Sam, do you have parting thoughts on the top 30 MBA program?
No, I mean, other than what we said, there's some really good schools out there. So do your research and don't feel bad because it's really tough and you can do exactly what you want from those other schools.
Yeah, just get rid of the vanity. Okay, it doesn't matter which rank or position your school is in. It really, really doesn't. And it's sort of, if you constantly think that you're less of a person because you went to a top 40 school instead of a top 10, I can guarantee that you have a mental filter in the people you meet and sort of judge them based on their credentials. It's not a good way to live, right? Awesome. So again, I can see your comment, Mr. Great One. Thanks for calling Sam Chris. It sort of gave us a humor fodder. But drop us a comment later, like not in the live chat when the video goes published, and you can put in comments. Drop us a comment for future videos, and we'll definitely do more of these. Awesome. With that said, I'm going to go make some breakfast, and thanks so much for joining. I need a lot of coffee because I stayed up last night taking the GRE. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, Sam, for coming. Bye.